Welcome back to the Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. We are so glad to have Kerry, Owen, and Simon Thompson here with us to continue our conversation about hobbies and leisure activities that benefit us and the world around us. So I think there must be many benefits to having these eco-friendly hobbies, environmental benefits. But let's talk about the personal connection that we gain through leisure activities. Simon, how can birding cross boundaries and integrate us with other people from around the globe? I know you've traveled a lot.
It's funny. I'll backtrack and say I remember once having a conversation with somebody. I spent a lot of time growing up in Nairobi in Kenya, and I was talking to somebody and they said, I can't believe you go to Africa and Kenya and you watch birds. That's such a waste. You should be doing other things instead. And I thought about it and I went, you know what? I think that's grossly unfair. And the person who made those comments basically had really no knowledge of what environmental people do around the world. And in a nutshell, what we do, when I go to Panama, we have local guides. We stay in local hotels. We use as much local as possible wherever we go. And that tells people the environment is important and people from overseas are coming there to spend money and to enjoy it. And it's so satisfying. Yes, that may not seem a lot, but it's so satisfying to see how that has transferred to the local people. And now how some of the local people with a little bit more, of course, some of this may be completely foreign to them, how they have now embraced it and absolutely just taken it as far as they can go. It does so much good around the world because you're proving to people that what they've got is valuable.
That's important. It really is. Reminds me of a conversation we had just a few weeks ago on here, Amy, about appreciating the good things that other people have and responding to that. Mm-hmm. Kerry, what are the similarities of beekeeping? What are some similar hobbies that people in other countries might share? Or is there like a global beekeeping universe?
There is. There's beekeepers in every county. I was the president of the South Carolina State Beekeepers Association. Been on the board there for like 20 years. Just recently retired from that. But yes, there's Eastern Apiculture Society, Epimodium. There's the American Beekeeping Federation, Bee Culture. There's a lot of information out there about bees. It's very, bees are one of those things that, I'm a beekeeper and they say, whoa, the first thing people think about with bees is getting stung. And so we generally have to educate people and people from other countries too. And then sometimes the people from other countries educate us because they're using Africanized honeybees to make honey. And so there's a lot to learn out there. But one of the things we share for fun is like sharing a fine wine or a great cigar. We share honey. We have honey tastings. And people bring honey from all over the world, and it's amazing to just have that opportunity. So if you ever get an opportunity to go to one of those types of honey tastings, it's very interesting. I read a book about Brother Adams back 25 years ago. He was a monk, and he made heather honey. And they didn't have all the fancy equipment like we did today, but he had these big oak tanks made. And he started washing. When he would cut the wax off to sling the honey out, he'd take those wax cappings and put into a tank and get all the honey off of the cappings, which would normally just be wasted. But he made mead. and he became one of the most famous mead makers in the world. And so you can share a lot of things back and forth. And that's just one way that we do it.
We learn from people all around the world all the time. That's the main thing. I mean, yes, we come from a quote unquote civilized country or society, but you know what? Everybody can teach everybody else something. And
yeah. Oh, I love that.
So appreciative.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, and again, that just leads us right into, Simon, you just kind of set this next topic up. You know, I spent time in a very rural village in Liberia, and one of the women boiled lemongrass and made the most lovely cup of tea I've ever had, you know. And so, I mean, and this was over a coal fire. There's no technology, no electricity ever are in that area. And so you're right. We can learn from others, and this is lovely. So let's talk a little bit. We talked about the time constraints for hobbies and leisure time, but there is a financial price tag sometimes associated with certain leisure activities. So how do we access some of these hobbies that we're interested in without breaking the bank? What do you think, Kerry?
Well, I'm probably the wrong one to ask that question. When you come in and people say, you know, how much does it cost to have a hive of bees? We give them the breakdown. And, you know, it gets expensive. You know, by the time you buy your suit and your smoker and your hive tool and the beehive, the box they live in, and then you buy the bees, you know, it can get on up there. $400 or $500 is about the minimum, you know, for the start. But we always tell them, you know, each frame of honey you pull out is at least $15. At least $15. If you just sold it to the produce stand, it'd be $15. Or you could do like I did for a lot of Christmases. I saved a lot of money by giving somebody a jar of honey. And so I got my money back, you know, just by not having to buy Christmas gifts until it turned into something more. But that's kind of how I started. And I also made all my own equipment. You know, I put a table saw on a $600 credit card at Home Depot and started sawing, making beehives. And I can't do that now. We can't keep up. We sell a lot more today, but that's how I started, just under a shed.
Okay, but a little that does help to help, you know, that person that maybe wants to start something small and do it yourself type thing. And like you were saying, it doesn't always have to, you know, you can start small.
Yeah. And then I would go and work with another beekeeper who had a lot of bees. And at the end of the day, you know, he'd pull out a few frames of bees and put in a box that I could take home with me. You know, so after about 10 trips, I had 10 hives. You know, so I kind of worked. I traded labor, you know, and then until I got hired at Clemson, and then I was able to do a little bit more then.
Yeah, a little bartering. I love that. That's great. What do you think, Simon?
Well, it's as expensive or as inexpensive as you want. To be honest, starting as a complete beginner, Holland, if I was going to say, here, take up birding, I would say, I wouldn't go to wouldn't recommend you go to a big box store and buy a pair of binoculars. Because invariably, if you buy a cheap pair of binoculars, you look through them once and you go, oh, these aren't very good. I'm not going to enjoy this. So what I tell people is come up with a price tag, maybe $300, much as Kerry said, just like a base price. Come up with $300 by yourself and these pair of binoculars. And these days, you can get a decent pair of binoculars for about $200 to $300. Yes, they won't be as good as $1,000 pair of binoculars, but they will still be excellent. $20, maybe less than that for a bird book and a notepad, and you're set. That's all you need. Yes, you can get high tech. I've got laser pointers, speakers, binoculars, telescopes, cameras, you name it. I've got all this gear. That's because I've progressed and progressed and progressed. But starting off, a pair of binoculars, a notebook, and a bird book, and that's all you need. A few $100s and you're set. Mm. And yes, you can feed the birds in your backyard. It doesn't cost very much. You can put some bird seed on the ground and watch things, and it's very inexpensive. So it's a great, and you can make your own bird feeders. You can make them out of milk containers, milk bottles, recycle them. It's very, very easy to do. And it's funny, we have a bird bath in the front garden when it doesn't get knocked over by the bears, which is once a week. But birds love moving water, and I've got this under a dogwood tree. It's a nice big shallow bird bath. And instead of one of these very high-tech misters that comes and drops water into the bird bath to create moving water attract the birds, I've got a milk container with a hole I bodged in with a nail, and it drips into the bird bath because I've got the cap on to it. Creates a pressure, a vacuum, and that really attracts the birds. It doesn't last that long, but it's cheap and inexpensive, and it brings in the birds. I've got scarlet tanagers and hooded warblers and things coming into the bird bath quietly. And if you take your time, you can just enjoy sitting there watching them.
I love all these do-it-yourself ideas, Holland. This is perfect. This is exactly what we were hoping for, because again, we want things to be. I think it's great to have things that are accessible, and and you both mentioned it earlier. Something in your essential element is one, enthusiasm, curiosity, and being able to share this with joy. So, if you already hit a barrier because of a price point, you're not even going to try it. So I really love these do-it-yourself ideas.
Well, on that same line, Kerry, what would you say to someone who was thinking about getting started in beekeeping?
Well, the very first thing that I tell everyone is, find your local beekeeping association and go visit. Generally it's $5 or $10 to become a member. Sometimes it's free, but they'll let you come and visit for free. You can decide whether you want to be a member or not and participate in some of the events that they have. But if you get a chance to go to a state bee meeting, even better, because you can hear professors and you can hear just hobbyists talk about the things they do, the tricks of the trade, like Simon was speaking earlier. You have to start almost with the education with honeybees, because there is a liability there, with neighbors and, things. So I advise everybody to know a little bit about a honeybee before you start playing with them like we do, because, they're a wild creature that we're trying to keep alive. And it also has a lot to do with our food source here in the United States of America. And, you take honeybees, they have to have honeybees to pollinate anything that is not wind pollinated. And so, just little things. I think the education's important, but we want to make sure when they do it that they can keep them alive so they can get the benefits of the pollination, and they can get the benefits of the honey. They can eat the pollen. They can use the beeswax to make candles, soap, lotions. And so if they go get the education, they find out that this hobby may bring back more joy than they were expecting at first, because, there's a lot of other things, like Simon was talking about, just enjoying being outside, walking through the woods, what that is doing for you, being grounded and your endorphins in your brain. It makes you happy. And so it just keeps going back to it makes you happy. And so I try to tell everybody, if you get the education first with the bees, then when you get the bees, you'll be happy and successful.
It's funny, as I said, I just got back I led 2 bird watching tours across North Dakota in the prairie pothole area. And everywhere we went, we saw about 10 or 15 beehives in the prairie, multiple areas all across the Dakotas. There must be some organization that is doing prairie honey, wildflower honey, often in alfalfa fields or just in open prairie.
Alfalfa and clover is a big one.
And it was just, I didn't manage because I was working, so I didn't have a huge amount of time. I wish I'd brought back some wild North Dakota honey. I thought that would have been rather nice. But hopefully,
I landed in Montana and stayed in Montana for about 10 days. And as soon as I got off the plane and got in the rental car and started up the road, it's supposed to be a vacation. Start up the road, and here's a big bee yard with a barrier fence around it. I pull over, get the number from the guy off of his box, call him up, and here I am working on vacation because I want to go see his place. I want to go see what he does. How does he do it? What kind of honey do you make? He's making a lot of sage honey in Montana.
I think that's if you're a hobbyist or leisure, and if it's going to be a continuation of a hobby, having the enthusiasm and wanting to know more about it really just keeps you going. You don't have to worry about looking for something to do. I mean, I remember being stuck in airports and with non-birding friends, and they were all grumpy and wondering when we were going to get the next plane. And I said, "See you later, I'm going birding." And I would wander off and go and look for birds, whatever place. I was in Pakistan once and we went off and did it. Maybe not the safest place in the world to do it, but heck, it's good for your mental health. And the bottom line is, as you notice from people in high stress sports activities around the world, things like mental health are really important. And we take it for granted that yes, we have a high-tech career, or my job can be pretty hefty at times with dealing with people and reservations and airlines and goodness knows what, and walk in the woods and just unwinding and just getting away from it all can just be so therapeutic.
Wow, Kerry, you just dove right into where I want to go next, because we know that nature teaches us things, and Kerry, you have been so keen on this idea of education, and as a teacher, that is like you are talking my language. As we think about moving into this next season of life and re-entering and restarting and regaining our footing, I'm going to ask both of you, but I'm going to start with Kerry first. What are some of the lessons and things that bees teach us as a community, as a society, that we can transfer into dealing with life?
Well, so, a lot of addiction counseling, addiction recovery places use hobbies to keep your mind busy, to get your endorphins going, hiking through the woods and kayaking down a river, working as a group, being together in a social environment, learning how to help the person that's weaker than you, and learning how the weak ones can combine together to become strong. And so I believe that a lot of these hobbies that we're talking about is giving back to the world because of what Simon was talking about, your mental clarity. And the other part in with honeybees is, I try to be creative. And so I go to the city and I say, "Hey, y'all mind if we plant a bunch of flowers around town?" Well, you know what they said? Yeah, why not? Everybody loves flowers. And so we plant pollinator gardens and things. And people will come and get their picture made in front of the pollinator gardens. So we try to tell people, they see the honeybees and the butterflies and all the other insects flying around on flowers. And so you just walk them right through the middle of that. And, they see the bees. They don't have to worry about being stung. They're up close. They're personal. They see the connection. Another thing that we do is we are a partner with the Bee Calls project. And so that's putting observation hives in schools. And so it was, hard to get that started. But once we got it started and people got over the fear of the honeybees, and we started educating them about the honeybees, every teacher wanted one in their class. And now we're going even further, and we've made a digital beehive. The Savannah Bee Company is the one that did it, and they made a digital beehive that they can put anywhere. You don't have to worry about the bees at all, but it teaches you. I put mine in my coffee shop. And so people sit there and drink coffee and learn about honeybees. And so it's just little things that, like that educates people a little bit more about, a lot of people where does honey come from? Well, Publix. Well, yeah, it does. But, there's a beekeeper somewhere made it, track him down. And so we try to express to people the importance of the local food versus the other food. We try to do that with everything we touch inside our store. So we're trying to be local, be grounded, be present, and teach the community, what we do. And, we've been doing it 25 years. And now one of my greatest pleasures, in 2016, I won the South Carolina Farmer of the Year, and I was the very first beekeeper ever nominated in the United States. And so that was a great honor. But the reason why it was so good for me was I was around like 52 other farmers that had won it before me at a roundtable meeting, and we were all discussing our problems. And one of the biggest problems is when we get old, what do we do? And so we're all trying to learn how to pass it down to the kids, and how do we do that? And so I got to listen to all these other people tell me how they did it in their business. And so we implemented some of the same things here. And now my son's running most all of our bees. And we still do it the old-fashioned way, but after 25 years and with COVID and employee problems, I've ordered a automatic bottling system. So we're going to turn that into tours. People used to come and watch people bottle Coca-Cola. Well, they'll be coming watching us bottle Be Well honey. And so that'll be kind of fun. That's another way that we get people involved in what we do. We do a festival every year, feed people for free, hire bands, and play games. And, we try to make it fun.
I love that. How about you, Simon? How can we regain our footing as we think about the bird communities and maybe some of the examples that birds communities, and, I had the opportunity this morning watching some Canadian geese flying in that V, and you're just going, that's just beautiful community right there, and so how can we take those stories and kind of transfer them to our communities?
Well, I like what Kerry said about education, and to be honest, when we talk, I've seen more and more pollinator gardens. They're popping up everywhere. It's that makes awareness for bees, for insects, for monarch butterflies, for whatever species we're talking about, I think. But habitat, of course, is more important than just a particular trying to protect an individual species if we start working on habitats. So I think the bottom line is, if we start small and the more we can get out, the more we can educate people about habitat. I went to somebody's house recently because I get bird questions sort of non-stop all day long sometimes. Why don't I have cardinals at my house? And I went to this person's house and they'd cut down every single bush. And I went, why would you do such a thing? Oh, it looks nice. I said, but you now don't have any other wildlife in your garden, and you certainly won't get any cardinals. If that's what you really want, we need to start, again, we just need to keep the education up about realizing that we aren't the only creatures on this planet. We don't need to destroy everything, and we need to keep learning about what other creatures need and how we can share the planet together. And I think there's some things that I'm fascinated about that I've heard recently. I don't know if there's one locally, but I know there's one up in Maine and another big one west of London in England. And these are these rewilding places. And it's fascinating me. And I really, when I go to England next week, I'm going to see if I can get to this big estate west of London that's been rewilded. And apparently it's being farmed and the yields are good. The wildlife is thriving. And I go, you know what? Maybe looking at corporate farms across mid-America when it's just soybeans as far as the eye can see, maybe this isn't what we need. Maybe we do need to look a little bit more of a gentler, more inclusive approach to sharing the planet with other things.
Wow. I love that. These are such good things to think about as we move forward into what can we learn in this season and taking that into the next step. Thank you so much for sharing.
We have one final question that we like to ask everyone who joins our table at the Afterword. What's a metaphor to help us better understand the birds and the bees? Or to understand the value of hobbies and leisure activities?
So glad you clarified that, Holland.
Ooh,
That's a tough one. Simon, you're going to have to go first so I can follow you.
I am. I'm just going to come up with something smart and witty, but I can't. I would say it's funny. One of the things that sticks with me, which yes, I'm quite. I know quite a bit about bees, but not much about beekeeping. Is when you started saying yes, we're going to have to buy bees, and I bet you 99% of people who listen to this go, "You have to buy bees? Don't they just come?"
Yeah. That's one of the things that people really they don't know is how we have damaged part of our agriculture. When we were at the round table down in Moultrie, Georgia, and I had my chance to speak, the farmers there were the row crop farmers, and I saw a lot of them when I explained to them that they could buy, a certain product that was not harmful, that would do the same thing and not kill honeybees, and it was actually cheaper than the product they were using. Then they started looking at me sideways, and so we had a big conversation about, if you look on the shelf when you're buying something, look on the back, see if it's harmful to honeybees. It's pretty easy. And they said, I've never done that before. And so I think a lot of them left there that day thinking that they would do that. And if I had to do anything, it's kind of cliche, but we need to save the bees.
Yep. Heartily agree.
I appreciate you sharing that. Before we go, how can people be in touch with you, Kerry, and buy honey or learn more about beekeeping?
So our headquarters are in Pickens, South Carolina. It's called Be Well Honey Farm. We have a health food store and a coffee shop on one end of town, right by the Doodle Park. And then on the other end of town, we have our beekeeping supply where we do sell the bees and all the beekeeping equipment. And we have a venue there where we teach our classes. So that's 909 West Main Street and then 205 Hampton Avenue in Pickens, South Carolina. And it's 898-648-898-5122, or just Google us at bewellhoneyfarm.com. And we are in, I think, all the grocery stores, in your little farm stores, except maybe Aldi and Lidl. And so just check us out there. And most of the time, the kids are the ones that turn their mom and dad onto it. The kids come to school or come from school to tour our farm. And so when they're going through the grocery store, they point to our honey. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, we're in Pickens, Be Well Honey Farm.
I love honey, so I'll make a point of looking for it.
Thank you.
Simon, how can people get in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Well, the simplest thing is to just get onto the internet and Google birds in Asheville, and up we pop. Oh, which is nice. But we, of course, Ventures Birding Tours based out of Asheville. But what's been interesting is, yes, we did, I should say, tours all over the world. Well, guess what? We don't currently. We have done a sort of a U-turn, and instead of doing exotic trips across the planet, we do road trips all across the US, and we are having fun. We've got tours from South Carolina to North Dakota to California, and we're covering the US. So just Ventures Birding Tours, or our website is birdventures.com. Not like adventures, bird ventures. But just Google birds, Asheville, up we pop.
And one more question. Have you seen a quetzal?
There are several species of quetzal. I've seen all of them.
Figured you had, but I was curious. I lived in Guatemala for several years, and
yes,
of course, that's the name of the currency, and it's on the pictures on everything. But I never
saw one.
Never saw one.
It's tough in Guatemala. I've seen them up at a couple of the coffee farms in the higher elevations.
Okay.
Yep. You have to go to exactly the right habitat up in the higher mountains, and they're not difficult. Got to go to the right place.
Well, we appreciate everyone joining us for this conversation. And next week, we're going to be talking about my favorite hobby, sleep, and the impact that sleep has on focus and concentration and distraction. So we'll be getting some Z's in.
I love that, Holland. We finally, you gave us a little picture into your favorite hobby. That's awesome. Well, thank you again to Simon and Kerry. And as always, we would ask people to leave us a review, rate us on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, become a subscriber, because it does help keep the conversations going. And as always, you are welcome at our table.